the big narrative that's getting painted, I guess, in the media and even at a barbecue is since the CGT exemption came in, property prices soared.
Mm-hmm.
I know you've done a lot of research on this. Like, what's the actual truth behind that?
Look, the truth is that, if you're thinking about a compounding return, you're looking at a compounding return of around 7.19% Australia-wide prior, so from 1980 to 2000, and then post-2000, you're looking at a compounding interest return of around 7.03, I think are the rough numbers. So it's been roughly the same, but it just looks more impressive on a chart, right? Because obviously that's the power of compound. So the reality is it hasn't necessarily delivered what some commentators are saying out there. The vast majority of supply, over 90% of private rental accommodation is supplied by everyday Australians. And that is hundreds of billions of dollars of investment. And I was talking to a colleague of mine on the board, and he was saying, something like 85 to 90% of all new construction in residential is actually done by 95% of these mum and dad investors, developers and builders. So, the government spends all of their time talking to property council and all of the sort of big end of town, but the vast majority of the supply is actually being delivered by these tradies and these mum and dads who are finding the funds to turn a single home into 3 townhouses or whatever that may be as well. So I just find it fascinating and frustrating that we have, policy debate that doesn't go rich into all the nuances which it needs to consider. And then when you do that properly, you get good policy settings.
Do you think we'll sit here in 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, 3 years' time and go, geez, we're beating the drum on this, and we were pretty confident that it wasn't going to solve problems, only going to create more? Do you think that's going to be the case?
I think when you also combine it, if the problem is still supply, and that's the number one issue that we need to solve here, if you combine that in concert with higher interest rates, which looks likely we're going to get, it's going to be a debate around whether it's higher interest rates or whether it was policy settings that did it. But the bottom line is we're going to have less supply and rents and property prices are most likely going to go up. Any investor who's thinking about investing shouldn't be thinking just in 1, 2, 3 year timeframes. They should be thinking in longer term timeframes. So, Lachlan, to come back to your point, I think it would be silly of them to issue that policy setting. I think there's no problems in trying to reform capital gains tax, but that's why we are pitching PIPers and pickers policy in terms of what that story looks like. Because the reality is, if we get the settings right, we won't have to say, I told you so. And that's why we also need to be, basically screaming out now because, the budget papers are being written in the next month. Like Penn is going to paper right now on those budget papers, ready for May. Put it out to anyone who's in the government or Treasury or anyone who sets these rules. Talk to us. We're sort of saying, can we organise ourselves? And that is, unfortunately, one of the weaknesses of mum and dad and individual everyday Australian property investors. We're not organised. And that's why we set the Picker Association up to try and get everyone, as members and be organised.
Yep.
So have a voice. But what about the voice of the actual investor? Right? Because in some cases, the property managers and the property investment advisors, they have an agenda, okay? But the true voice has to come from those owners. And so that's what Picker was set up to try and achieve.